interesting question. Again, sometimes when individuals ask questions, they are questions that I never would ask. And they're also questions that I would probably never preach on unless you ask them. So here's the next one. What is the meaning of the words, salvation is of the Jews? That passage is found in the pages of our Bible, John 4, verse 22. Jesus is speaking, and listen to what He says. Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Now just think, if you went into the Bible and you just picked that passage out of its context, what would you think? You would think that salvation is of the Jews, wouldn't you? You would think that the Jews are still God's chosen people. You would think that God still looks upon the Jews as those people that He is in a covenant relationship with. Salvation is of the Jews. Jesus said that. It's got to be true. Folks, you don't lift passages out of their context. So let's go back to the context. The context involved Jesus responding to a Samaritan woman. John 4, verse 7. Jesus and His disciples were on a journey back to the city of Jerusalem, and rather than go around Samaria, they passed through it. It was hot, it was dry, Jesus was tired. He sits down at Jacob's well, and the apostles go into Samaria in order to purchase supplies. And while He's there, a Samaritan woman comes along to draw water out of the well. And a conversation ensues between Jesus and the woman. We get down to verse 20 of the context, and the conversation has really gotten deep. And the woman asks Jesus a very pointed question. Listen, our fathers worship in this mountain, but ye say Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Not a question there, is there? But there is, isn't there? What she's asking Jesus is this. Our fathers of the Samaritans say that Mount Gerizim is the place where we're supposed to worship. Folks, they were sitting right at the foot of Mount Gerizim at the time. If it were a clear day, she could have looked south from her and she could have seen the hilltop called Jerusalem. She could have pointed to it. But you say Jerusalem is where people ought to worship. What's she asking? Who is right? Who is right? You ever heard this statement? Don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. That's about where this woman is right now. But let's go back for a minute and let's talk about her being a Samaritan. The Samaritans were a mixed breed of people. The Assyrian armies had come into the 10 tribes in 722 BC and had carried them away into Assyria. But there was a handful of Israelites that were left in that northern part of the kingdom. Those individuals intermarried with foreigners. And they developed an entire nation of their own known as the Samaritans. And they occupied a position of land between Judah and Galilee. Here's what's interesting. They honored the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That was their law. But that was the only part of the old law that they accepted. They did not worship in the city of Jerusalem. Oh no, they had formulated their own place of worship, and it was on that mountain right there where Jesus and this woman were discussing this question. Right at Mount Gerizim is where they worshiped. The Jews despised these people. And when you go back to John 4 verse 9, you see the animosity that existed. The woman had come to the well and Jesus asked her this question, or made this statement to her, "Give me to drink." She was shocked. And the woman said unto Jesus, How is it that you, being a Jew, ask water of me, a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. She knew, Jesus knew. Folks, there was a hatred between these two groups. Most of the time, the Jews wouldn't even travel through the land of Samaria. They would cross the Jordan River, go up the Transjordan, and cross back over into Galilee, and then do it all over again, coming back home. I'm not touching that Samaritan soil. Nasty. Sinful. No fellowship between these individuals. So now Jesus is asked a question by this woman. Our fathers say we're supposed to worship right here, and you say we're supposed to worship over there. Who's right? Don't ask a question if you don't want an answer. Folks, the Samaritan system was contrary to the law. Notice this, their worship was empty and vain. It was useless. It was profitless. Did you hear what Jesus says? Ye worship, ye know not what. Isn't that amazing? You know, we're 2,000 years removed from that day. But Jesus was right there that day, and all of this was going on. And He tells this lady very plainly, you don't even know what you're worshiping. The Jews, on the other hand, were following the law of Moses. And they were following it the way it was supposed to be. And therefore, He says what? Salvation is of the Jews. In other words, what He's telling that woman is this. The Samaritans are wrong. The Jews are right. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to tell anybody they're wrong and offend them. She asked the question. If you don't want an answer, don't ask. We know what we worship. Salvation is of the Jews. What He is meaning is at that particular point in time. The old law was still binding. Jesus hadn't died upon the cross of Calvary. And yes, at that time, salvation was of the Jews. But folks, today, the Jews are not God's chosen people. If you're taking notes, you write down these two verses. First one's found in Romans chapter 2, 28 and 29. Listen to what Paul writes. For he is not a Jew. Did you hear what he said? He is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Neither is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly. And circumcision, that of the heart. In the Spirit, not in the letter, who praises is not of men, but of God. Just because you are a Jew outwardly doesn't make you a Jew, Jesus says. Jews today are Jews inwardly, not outwardly. You go just a little bit further in Romans chapter 9, and listen to what Paul writes. For they are not all Israel that are of Israel, neither are they children because they are the seed of Abraham. But in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Paul understood just because you're a Jew doesn't make you a Jew anymore. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? They are not all Israel, which are of Israel. What he's saying is this, folks. There's a new Israel. Christians, the church, the elect, the called, the chosen of God are now spiritual Israel. If anybody walks up to you and say, are you a Jew? You know what you need to say? You betcha. Well, you don't look like a Jew to me. Well, I is. You want to know why? Because of Galatians 3:29. Look what he says. And if you be Christ's, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Are you Christ's? Do you belong to Christ? If you are, then guess what? You are the seed of Abraham. You are a Jew today. We are the spiritual Israel of God, and the physical Israel is no longer the people of God.